My name is Maggie Quirt. I teach in the Department of Equity Studies at York University in Toronto. York is located on the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Mississauga of New Credit, and the Métis of Ontario. I'll be reading the section of the TRC report on public education forums, education days, and youth dialogues. Education for reconciliation must happen not only in formal education settings, such as elementary and secondary schools and post-secondary institutions, but in more informal places. One of the ways that the Commission fulfilled its public education mandate was through forums, such as National Event Education Days and Youth Dialogues. The Commission believes that establishing a strong foundation for reconciliation depends on the achievement of individual self-respect and mutual respect between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canadians. While this is true for adults, it is particularly urgent with regard to young people. They are the lifeblood of reconciliation into the future. At the Saskatchewan National Event, grade 8 student Brooklyn Ray, who attended the Education Day, said, "I think it's really important for youth to voice their opinions, to not only prove to themselves that they can, that their voice is important, but to prove to adults that they have a voice and that they can have a strong opinion that is important in the world." Elder Barney Williams, a member of the TRC's Survivor Committee and one of the panelists at the Education Day Youth Dialogue, said, "I think more and more people are realizing that the engagement of youth is crucial. For me, as a survivor, I'm really impressed with how much they knew. I was very impressed with the type of questions the audience asked. It tells me, as somebody who's carried this pain for over 68 years, that there's hope. Finally, there's hope on the horizon, and it's coming from the right place. It's coming from the youth." The Commission agrees. We believe that children and youth must have a strong voice in developing reconciliation policy, programs, and practices into the future. It is therefore vital to develop appropriate public education strategies to support the ongoing involvement of children and youth in age-appropriate reconciliation initiatives and projects at community, regional, and national levels. Through direct participation in the TRC's national events, thousands of young people and their teachers across the country had the opportunity to learn about the residential schools and think about their own role and responsibility in reconciliation. The TRC's education days were designed specifically for elementary and high school students and their teachers. Young people had the opportunity to listen to and interact with elders and survivors. They attended interactive workshops where they learned about the residential school history, resilience, and healing through the arts: painting, carving, storytelling, music, and film. They visited the learning places to walk through the Legacy of Hope Foundation display, 100 Years of Loss, and to see posters and archival photographs of the residential schools from their own region. Education days were well attended. For example, at the British Columbia National Event in Vancouver, approximately 5,000 elementary and high school students from across the province spent the day at the national event. In advance of Education Day, teachers in each region were given orientation materials to help prepare their students and themselves. In total, close to 15,000 young people across the country have participated in such education days, most with a commitment to take what they learned and witnessed back to their home schools to share with thousands more of their fellow students. Over the course of the TRC's mandate, the Commission worked in partnership with the International Centre for Transitional Justice's Children and Youth Program, ICTJ, to host a series of small retreats and workshops. Youth dialogues were also integrated into Education Day activities at national events. Their purpose was to engage youth in dialogue and to support their efforts to make their own submissions to the TRC. For example, in October 2010, the Commission co-sponsored an Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal youth retreat near Vancouver, British Columbia. Young people came together to learn about the residential schools, talk with elders, and share team-building activities. One young participant said that during the retreat, quote, "We learned more about each other in the past. It's really important because it actually teaches us the stories that we heard. It touched us, and it inspired us to become better people," end quote. In June of 2011, Molly Tilden and Marlisa Brown, two young women who attended this retreat, produced their own video documentary, Our Truth, the Youth Perspective on Residential Schools. The production featured interviews with their classmates in Yellowknife about what they knew about the residential schools. They presented the video at the Northern National Event in Inuvik, Northwest Territories. Virginie Laddish, director of ICTJ's Children and Youth Program, summarized what the two young women found and the subsequent impact of the project. Quote, "The answers are shocking. Some students had no knowledge or simply complete indifference. Those are largely the non-Aboriginal youth interviewed. Other students talk about the enduring impact they see in terms of high rates of alcoholism, suicide, and teenage pregnancies." So there's a huge disconnect in terms of how the young people view the relevance of this legacy and what knowledge they have of it. When that video was shared with people involved in designing the secondary school curriculum for the Northwest Territories and Nunavut, they could not believe that their youth had such reactions. So the curriculum on residential schools, which was previously barely addressed in the classroom, was revised to be a mandatory 25 hours of instruction, of which Ms. Brown and Ms. Tilden's video is a critical component. End quote. In October of 2011, the TRC ICTJ initiative prepared and supported a group of Mi'kmaq youth reporters at the Halifax national event. They interviewed survivors and documented the TRC event. At a follow-up retreat in the community, the young reporters discussed their experiences and produced a documentary called Our Legacy, Our Hope. In 2012, the documentary was presented at the Youth Dialogue during the TRC's national event in Saskatchewan. Some of the youth also presented this documentary to international policymakers at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues in 2012. The Commission's interactions with youth indicated that young people care deeply about the past. They understand that knowing the whole story about Canada's history is relevant for today and crucial for the future. This was evident, for example, in an expression of reconciliation made to the TRC at the Alberta National Event on March 27, 2014, by a group of Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal youth from the Centre for Global Education in Edmonton. One of the non-Aboriginal youth, Hanshi Louie, told us about the project. First, the group, made up of youth from First Nations reserves, the rural communities of High Prairie and Fort Macleod, and the city of Edmonton, spent a month studying and talking about residential schools and their shared history. Then they held a virtual town hall where over 300 students talked about their vision for reconciliation. Emerald Bless from Little River Cree Nation told us that, quote, "Youth believe that reconciliation is the way to establish lost trust and open doors to positive and productive communications. When we affirm every culture's pride in their heritage, healing can take place," end quote. Haley Greer Stewart, representing the Kainai, Siksika, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney First Nations, said that, quote, "The youth believe that within our communities we need to teach and create awareness, cultural appreciation, as well as healing and restoration. If we introduce youth to the culture at a young age in our schools, through curriculum and the practice of restorative justice, it will teach the younger generation to be proactive instead of reactive." Métis youth Shelby Laughlin said that, quote, "The youth of Alberta believe that in order to move forward towards healing and reconciliation, it is important for action to be taken on a national and provincial level. First, we must re-establish trust between these two, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal collectives, and through the honoring, acknowledgement, and respect of all treaties and settlements, we believe this can be achieved," end quote. Youth forums and dialogues are a vital component of education for reconciliation. Nonprofit organizations can play a key role in providing ongoing opportunities for Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal youth to participate in intercultural dialogue and work actively together to foster reconciliation. And the following is the call to action related to this section of the report. Call to action number 66. We call upon the federal government to establish multi-year funding for community-based youth organizations to deliver programs on reconciliation and establish a national network to share information and best practices.